To MathPacPlus An Introduction. We begin from the home screen, Equations and Graphs. Of course, from Equations and Graphs, this is where we go to enter our expressions and look at graphs. Our grapher has function capabilities, parametric and polars. In functions, you have a pull-up menu. You have the option on the spinners to see equals, greater than, less than, draw inverse, or off for each individual function. Everything you need should be on one screen. The graphs can be full screen or half screen, showing the menus on the bottom. From the menus, we have zoom in, zoom out, calculations, show table, show window options. Of course, the window options are the same standard window options you're used to seeing. One of them is show table view. The table view is interactive. In other words, if you touch a point on the table, it highlights the table and the graph. We can enable or disable the trace and the pan. We also have the option to save the screenshot. Here I entered a bunch of numbers, but you can enter your favorite words too. The menu can pull up calculations. This is where we find evaluate, minimum, maximum, zeros, x-intercepts, intersection points, find the limits, the differentials, and integrate. Of course, you can show this full screen with the function shown at the very bottom. That one was differential. This one is integration. You'll notice that all answers are given in correct interval notation. In addition to differentials, limits, integration, we also have the ability to graph overlapping areas using greater than or less than. So you can see that we can do inequalities as well. Of course, the graph does come with extensive help for each one of these options. In equations and graphs, this is where you also find parametric graphing. Here's an example of the input screen, and of course from the graph screen the functions are highlighted with the images. The functions are listed at the top, as is with polar. Here's the input polar screen, and of course with polars you can get some pretty neat stuff. Here's some just spirals. You'll notice they are color coordinated with the functions on the top. Of course, for parametrics and polars, the menu options are adjusted accordingly, and you notice they still have the help option, and the window view has been modified, allowing a T-min, T-max, and T-step. It's also a theta-min, theta-max, theta-step. Of course, you can still save those screenshots to anything you want, and they still comes with complete help. Moving on to math calculations, this is where we go to do things like find the slope-intercept equation. In other words, you can just simply enter 2 points, and the application will return the equation of the line from those 2 points, even if those 2 points form a vertical line. You can also do things like factor quadratic equations. Simply enter the coefficients from a trinomial in standard form, and the linear factors will be displayed. We can also display a sequence. We can also sum a sequence, and you'll notice both of these have the show help at the bottom, and of course the show help looks something like this. This is just the advice I give to my students, or that I have given to the students over the years, and there is a display help on every one of these functions. And so here's the ones for slope-intercept, display sequence, sum a sequence. See, they are individualized to fit the function. I've also added a TVM solver for those of you taking finite math or a business math, so you can solve for annual interest rate, present value, number of payments, payment amount, or compounds per year. It also has its full screen of on-screen help. Moving on to edit list, this is where we go to enter the data. Once you've entered the data, you have one-step jumps to things like regressions, list operations, list transformations. Of course, from list operations, you can add, subtract, multiply by scalars, sort ascending or sort descending those lists. Now, if you're back in the data and you want to transform lists, you just simply touch transform list, and you have access to the full expressions keyboard. So you can transform that data to look like or be anything you want. You can store that transform list back to itself, its own list, or a new list. That's up to you. Of course, it comes with its own help. Moving on to the matrix editor. In the matrix editor, this is where you go to build your matrix. You will enter a name and the dimensions for the matrix. You can also go to view save matrices from here to make sure you haven't already built one like it in the past. Now, once your blank matrix comes up and you start entering the values, you can save this as many times as you want under different names. You can also just simply adjust one cell and save as a different name, or you can touch matrix calculations and go straight to the calculations, which offers things like addition, subtraction, multiplication, scalar multiplication, transpose, inverse, determinant, and even a matrix solver. There's a few things that you don't normally see. For example, the vector dot product and the vector cross product you don't normally find in matrix calculations on calculators. And these two you never see, the last two, convert matrix to list. You can convert each column of that matrix to its own list, or you can build a matrix simply by converting your existing list into a matrix. Now, once you run a calculation on a matrix, let's say transpose, you'll notice the result is given, and you have the option to save that result as a new matrix. So if you want to save your result, you just simply click on Save As, and you can save it as anything you want, allowing you to continue that operation. I clicked on the Help just to show you that there is help available for all of these, and the Save As menu looks like this last screen with all your matrices just saved, and you touch that name you want and it automatically pulls it into the matrix editor. Moving on to regressions, I offer 11 different regressions: linear, quadratic, cubic, quartic, polynomial, power regression, exponential regression, logarithmic, logistic, sine, and the one that's off the bottom of the screen is linear regression t-test. It is also offered, I just couldn't fit it on the screen here. All of these regressions come with the option for you to tell it where you put the x's and where you put the y's, a calculate button that will display the answer, and that will be the least squares regression equation along with the coefficient of determination, and one button to show the graph. Also, there's a help that brings up the formula and the help. Of course, all of these graphs are color coordinated. The regression equation will be shown in the same color as the graph, and the data will be shown as separate white points on the graph. The menus are fully accessible from the equations given by the regressions, and that means you can pull up, zoom in, zoom out, show table, you can save the screenshot, you can adjust the window. The calculator is a built-in scientific calculator. It does offer things for finite math students such as factorial, permutations, combinations. It does also handle full complex mathematics. That means with the I. All complex mathematics must be done in standard form, and all the answers are given in standard form. That means real value plus or minus a real value times I. And the calculator offers everything I think you need in one screen. I didn't bother to put a second function to bring other keys in. I tried to fit everything right here you need. The one you may not recognize is the one that says A over B, and that's simply the button that converts a decimal into a fraction. So here's an example of the complex arithmetic that can be done on the calculator. As you can see, all the answers are given in standard form, as is the input. You'll notice also that there's a button called RAD. This is most closely compared to something called a mode button. The button itself changes titles depending on when you touch it. If it says degrees and you touch it, it'll turn it to radians. If it says radians and you touch it, it'll turn it to degrees. So it is a mode button, and it does change the mode of the calculator, but it simply says the name of the mode that you're in. I thought that was a lot handier than having a button that said mode and having to guess what mode you might be in. Of course, the calculator does come with its own extensive help. Here's the help, and you can store any answer, recall any answer. And for the help, I simply put a couple of examples of things I'd want to see if I was using someone else's calculator for the first time. The statistics button at the bottom of the main menu gives access to the full package Math Stats Pack. Everything that was available in Stats Pack is now available. That means the entire distributions menu from binomial all the way up to the t distribution, all the intervals, all 6 intervals, 1 and 2 samples, all the test including up to ANOVA. That's 1 and 2 samples, z-test, t-test, proportion test, chi-squared, f-test, and ANOVA. Once you enter the data, explore data, you see that you have direct access to scatter plot, box plot, histogram, normal probability plot, and descriptive statistics, all from just one touch. Of course, once you've entered that data, let's say you chose basic descriptive statistics, of course you'll want to tell it where you put the x's and where you put the y's. I give you that option as radio buttons. And of course there are more options besides just those. Let's say you choose box plot. All the box plots, all the plots for that matter, are completely interactive. That means you just touch the screen. For example, I touched this middle box plot in the middle of it, and it highlighted that blue line, and it tells me the median is 5.5. I could touch any point on those boxes and it will tell me the appropriate value and highlight that value. You'll notice the little lines out to the edges of the graphs. Those are called fences. Some people don't want to see the fences. Most people don't want to see them, so I put in the option to hide fences. You'll also notice the option to identify plots. Once you have 3 box plots, you may forget which list contains which data. So I put identify plot to remind you which box plot is showing you which list of data. Thought that was a handy little thing to know, so you don't have to keep going back and forth to the list. Of course, all the box plots, histograms, scatter plots, anything that has a screen can be saved. The histograms are also interactive. You can slide your finger across the histogram, and as your finger moves across each one of these classes, it will be highlighted. And at the top label, you will see the class boundaries for that class and the frequency of that class. It can be full screen, or you can pull up the menu, and you notice in the menu we have access to something called relative frequency, and that's because the histograms can be shown as a relative frequency histogram. You'll notice now the frequency is shown as a percentile or a percentage, and so all the graphs are completely interactive. You can go to list operations from the Explore data. You can still add, subtract, multiply by scalar, or sort the data. Here's the basic descriptive statistics showing the one extra thing that most calculators do not show you, and that's the IQR at the very bottom of that screen. The IQR is simply Q3 minus Q1. It is the length of the box from a box plot. Most instructors do ask you to calculate it, but most calculators don't give you that number. I thought that was odd, so I added it to mine because I always ask my students for the IQR, so I put it in my calculator. Going on to the statistical distributions menu, you'll notice once again that I have from binomial distribution all the way up through t intervals. And the most important thing here is that I give word prompts. In other words, if you look at this screen, you see that it's asking you for the sample size. That's the exact same words you would see and read from the book and on the board from your instructor. I also give those variables, those letters there, the N, the P, and the X. If you go to that other famous calculator that we've all used for years and years, and you type in binomial PDF, you get a blank screen with an open parenthesis and a flashing cursor. You have to know to put in the N, the sample size, comma, the probability for success, P, comma, the exact number of successes, X. If you don't know that, it doesn't really help you. Mine gives you those words, the same words you're going to see in your book. It gives you those letters, just in case your problem happens to give the variables. I include the variables. I also give the answer the way it should be, probability of exactly X successes. So you know that you're finding the probability for exactly 1, exactly 2, exactly 3, exactly 4. The help does provide the formula in case you want to check it by hand or work it by hand, along with some notes that I'm used to giving over the years. You'll notice that the binomial CDF, if you look at the third line, that's the big change. It now says max number of successes, and that's because the CDF functions give you the probability starting from 0 going up to and including the number you enter. In this case, 5. If you compare this screen to the one 2 screens over, you notice the third line says exact number of success, whereas in the binomial CDF it says max number of success. As is the answer, words are also different. Probability that the number of successes is between 0 and X. So I do change. It is helpful. I believe that those words will make all the difference when you're trying to work these problems. I also included something called the exponential distribution. It is offered in most textbooks as an optional section or an optional chapter even, although it's not found on most calculators. So I added it on mine. Of course, it has the same word prompts, the same variables that you're going to see in your textbook. It does offer a graph. You can save the graph. It does come with its own help and formula, as do all the distributions. Going on to the normal CDF distribution, you'll notice once again that I give word prompts, lower bound, upper bound, mean, and I give the correct symbol, mu, deviation with the correct symbol, sigma, and the answer displays area under the curve. If you look at the bottom of that screen, you'll see calculate, show help, and graph. They're all just one touch away. So it is consistent for me to try to show the same words that you're going to see in the book and on the board, and give those same symbols that you're going to see in your notes, on the board, and in the book. Of course, any graph can be saved. Let's go on to statistical intervals. We have the 6 most popular intervals given in all first-year statistics courses, namely the 1 sample, 2 sample Z, 1 and 2 sample T, 1 and 2 sample proportion intervals. Of course, once again, I give word prompts and the correct notation, correct symbols. And if you look at the bottom, you see calculate, show help, and graph. If you look at this graph, you'll notice that the 95% confidence interval is given in correct interval notation. The words 1 sample Z interval, the word point estimate is given. All of these are things that you're going to see in your book. You're going to see them on the board, and so I thought I should put them in the app. And I'm just showing you a few more screens just to show you that I carry this theme throughout. All these graphs can be saved. You can zoom in, zoom out, adjust the window, whatever you want to do with them. They're fully interactive. Going on to statistical test, I give the standard 6 plus the chi-squared and the f-test. Once again, the use of word prompts, the use of words in the answers, and if you're running a t-test or t-interval, you can input those values directly from the list. So you just type the data into the list, you touch the button that says input from list, it'll ask you which list to go find the data. It fills out everything for you, unlike that other calculator where you have to go run the variable statistics yourself and input. Even if you tell it to read from the list, you still have to go and input the deviation and the mean. Not with my app. It calculates that for you and puts it in. All these graphs you can zoom in, zoom out. I just wanted to show you a few more of these, the chi-squared test, the f-test, along with the graphs. And you can see the second graph I zoomed in a little. Going on to equations and graphs, it's just a link to the equations and graphs we've already discussed, as is the regressions link. It's a link to those same 10 regressions that we've already talked about. The calculator is also a link to the standard scientific calculator we've already discussed. I just wanted to put them here on this menu. For those of you that have the stats pack, they're in a familiar location. For those of you that don't have the stats pack, it just saves you one click from having to go all the way back from the main menu, because you can access those things from this screen. And that ends this particular talk on MathPacPlus, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this little short video. Thank you.